call the meeting to order. We have up first our consent agenda, which includes a number, or just the prior minutes from November 20, as well as a number of first and second read policies. Any discussion or questions or concerns about any of that? I'll make a motion then to accept the consent agenda. We'll do that by roll. Sarah?
Aye.
Zach?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
Great, thank you. As far as prioritization of the meeting, I'm going to do a public comment, and then before we begin the meeting, I have a bit of board business to tend to extra from what we'll do at the end of the meeting. And Lynn, I know we have at least one executive session tonight, correct?
We have two.
Two, okay. Well, we'll do those at the end so we can let everyone kind of get on their way, especially with the roads being kind of potentially very snowy by the time we're letting out. Linda.
Potentially you'll have an executive session as part of the budget conversation.
Right, okay.
So maybe three.
So maybe three. The other two, non-related to budget, shall we do those at the end under board business? And who needs to stay for those?
Negotiations should go before budget, and the grievance and arbitration can go at the end.
Okay,
And we won't need any of the central office staff other than Morgan and them.
for the final ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, for any of them,
Yeah.
but we can let them go for the other ones. Okay. Okay, perfect.
Maybe Michelle for grievance and arbitration.
Okay. Sounds like a plan. All right. So Jared, please, yeah, you're up.
Thank you. Jared Valancourt from Berkshire. So as you're completing your school budgets, I want you to consider this. Many corporations are cutting their DEI programs. These programs have alienated much of their customer base, created division, and companies have learned that it's not the best use of their investment dollars. However, unlike these corporations, the school district continues to embrace DEI and other related programs at taxpayers' expense. For example, the Wayfinder Social Emotional Learning Program is described on the website as a step beyond SEL and the next generation SEL curriculum. The public has heard that this is a very expensive program. So just how much is this costing taxpayers? Another example is the Belonging, Dignity, and Justice program that was referenced on last year's FNESU annual report. This program appears to be from a company called Decolonize Design. The report referenced the company's founder who wrote, "Existing DEI initiatives only expose discriminatory attitudes, but do nothing to mitigate their effects on those who suffer from them." That is due in part because such programs are still rooted in white, heteronormative, dominant culture that uses white, heteronormative values as their standard. So just how much is this program and others like it cost the taxpayers? It's not just the cost of the programs themselves. It's also the training involved, the administration, and the cost of lost instructional time with no measurable results. So like many corporations are doing, the school district should cut its DEI, SEL, and other activist programs. Programs that have alienated much of the public, have indoctrinated and normalized certain ideologies with children, and are a distraction for providing a quality education that will help students be successful adults. Cutting these programs will also save taxpayers money. Alternatively, you could better invest this money into programs that will help students achieve success in reading, math, and objective science. Or you can invest this money toward teacher retention. Just imagine the impact of reallocating the money that is set aside for these programs into increasing the salary of teachers. Many taxpayers just want to see the school district get back to the basics. Thank you.
Before we dive into the bulk of the meeting, I wanted to say a few words, and I'm sorry I haven't been able to address this sooner. I've had a number of surgeries on my hands over the last month, and so I've been a little preoccupied. So I wanted to take a minute to address the anonymous letter that's been circulating on social media regarding the superintendent, the central office team, and some of the initiatives our supervisory union has been implementing. I certainly understand the challenges and tensions that many are struggling with as we make changes in the way we support and educate our learners. Change is never easy, particularly in districts with limited resources where the pressures on teachers, administrators, and staff are substantial. However, it's the role of the board and the administration to make decisions that prioritize the long-term success of our students and the sustainability of our districts, and that is what we're doing. The superintendent has been an unwavering advocate for student success. Her role requires making difficult decisions and upholding policies that may not always be popular. Her approach reflects the complexity and the magnitude of her responsibilities. The board works closely with the superintendent, and we're confident in her transparency, integrity, and commitment to our shared vision and the direction of the system. Contrary to what was said in the letter, this board has a deep understanding of both the fiscal and curricular and programmatic aspects of the system. The programs referenced in the letter, including the new graduation requirements and the Portrait of a Learner framework, are the result of nearly 7 years of collaborative research, planning, and gradual implementation. These initiatives are supported by extensive data, best practices, and national trends, all of which indicate they will better prepare students for future success. We are not the only system in Vermont or nationally moving in this direction. Claims that these efforts lack planning or direction are not accurate and do not reflect the thorough work undertaken by the central office and the board. To support our teachers and staff through these transitions, we have invested in and will continue to offer robust professional learning opportunities. These sessions are tailored to equip staff with the skills, tools, and understanding they need to feel confident and empowered in their roles. Our goal is to ensure that everyone feels supported as they implement these new practices and understand how they align with the vision and the goals of the board. And let's not forget that during the early conception and inception of the Portrait of a Learner, we engaged significant number of students in the work, and their ideas and perspectives were important to consider and vital to the process. Similarly, we have voluminous data to support the deep and thoughtful work which has gone into our SEL, equity, and teacher evaluation initiatives and processes. We can share and discuss this at any point and are committed to transparent engagement. We serve the public, we strive to be good stewards of public dollars, and we're always open to conversations about how to better serve our students. We value our teachers, our staff, our central office, our superintendent, and our students. The work we are doing to innovate and better prepare our learners will not always be easy, especially with increasing fiscal pressures under which we are all working. Moving forward, I hope we can build our capacity to engage in collaborative, respectful conversations that start from the premise that we're on the same team. Disagreement is inevitable, and while there's value in constructive feedback, it's best to lead with kindness and assume best intentions. And ultimately, I believe we want many of the same things, even if the vision of how to get there might differ. So, with that, we'll dive into the meeting. Thank you for giving me the space to share that. We have a number of spotlights tonight, so I'll start with Gab.
Thanks, Mary.
Yes.
Great, so I'm just going to provide an update on where we are with our work towards the future-driven teaching and learning here at FNESU. And it's important to just revisit the sort of the path we've been on since around 2013 when we started working on this. The state enacted passing legislation requiring proficiency-based graduation requirements, and we've kind of been on this path. And here we are in 24. We're about 4 months into our transition to these graduation requirements. We have some new people on the board, and certainly not everybody has been on this path since 2013. So just a reminder about why we're doing this work. Go ahead, Clay. So if you can think about in the 1970s, what skills might have been needed for work, just in your brains, imagine what we'd be learning in high school. Right. So these were the top 10 skills needed in 1970. Next slide. So here's 29 years later. It's around the same time. Can you click one more time? The Partnership for 21st Century Skills came out with the sort of the first framework on these skills that we are now have evolved. Next slide. In 2020, the World Economic Forum re-ranked them. The problem solving is getting a little more complex. Go ahead to the next slide. And this is the McKinsey study. This is more recent. Lynn's referenced it a lot of times. We've kind of compared it with our portrait of a learner over the past few years to see what's in common. And yeah, okay. So school and work then and now. If you look at some of the images on the right-hand side, we've got work represented sort of then and now. Used to be much more face-to-face, local economy, physical and manual. Could have predicted like one job in your lifetime, one career. And the flow of information was much more delayed than it is today. So with the advent of the internet, we've got a more global economy, more automation, changing workforce demands. More than one career is very likely in most people's lives now. And we have immediate access to information. So if you look at the image on the right-hand side on the bottom, that's Beta Technologies. It's located in Williston right now, and they just bought the Eveready factory, and they're building a new facility near the Highgate Airport. I don't know the details of that, but it's coming soon. So right here in Franklin County, this is sort of what these jobs are going to look like. And you can see that school on the left-hand side hasn't really changed a whole lot, but the work environment really has. I pulled up their website. If you are you on the next one, yeah. I can't see very much. I'm looking at both of these. You can see the job descriptions are requesting, quickly changing environments, being able to work in those. Organizational and time management skills, self-direction, teamwork, communication skills. And if you go to the next slide, just referencing our portable learner, some of the portable learner characteristics that are related to those qualities. So what's the work? We're really working to make teaching and learning look more like the world outside of school. That's what we've been doing this year. With more authentic problem solving, integrated content. So, in the real world, in what work, more than one subject area, you usually have to pull. You have to figure out what are the subject areas I'm going to need. It's not presented to you in little isolated bits. So trying to see more of that integrated content in the classroom, in school. Independent work, decision making, more interactive learning, and more active learning. And on this next slide, you can see some of those characteristics represented in our portrait of a learner. So how are we doing it? How is this work happening? At the elementary level, teachers have been working really hard to implement our new reading program and focus on some of those foundational reading skills and reading mastery. The K-8 teachers are working on math practices in order to build confidence around math with students. Social and emotional skills needed to do some of these portrait learner indicator skills, like building independence and self-regulation, is happening at the elementary level. Some people are focusing on that. People are addressing these. Not everybody's doing everything, but everybody's playing a part. And we built the Portrait of a Learner as a K-12 program, so that's one of the reasons that the elementary school teachers are busy working on this stuff to help. At the high school level, we're working on creating performance assessments, which are more performance-related assessments where students are demonstrating a skill rather than maybe taking a paper pencil type test. Creating routines for providing actionable feedback, creating ways for students to make decisions about their learning through reflection and self-assessment, and then also creating learning experiences that are cross-content or more integrated, like I mentioned earlier. So high school teachers have been working on that. As Mary mentioned, change is super complex, and if you look along the top of this chart, you can see sort of all the elements that have to be in place and work perfectly in order to get change to come out easily. That's never the case. We are in a district with lots of new teachers, people who haven't been with us for the past 20 years. And so we are definitely feeling some of the feelings on the right-hand side. Confusion, resistance, anxiety are popular ones, frustration. We've heard that definitely from teachers. And on the right-hand side is an image that I showed all teachers at the beginning of the year. Actually, I think it was last June when we sort of planted the seed for this year. It's just a typical sort of learning image. When you're learning something new, there's always this pit of work that doesn't feel good when you're trying to learn it. You're not quite confident with it yet. So we're experiencing some of that, I think. I know I am sometimes feeling in the middle there, so we're all feeling that in this change. And can you go back one more? I'm sorry, to the chart. If you haven't been here for a long time and you're missing the vision, you might be feeling one of those things on the right-hand side. But different polls are for different people, depending on where they're coming in, what their strengths are. And so, okay, now you can go to the next slide. Even though we have to do this hard work, we need to continue to grow and innovate and do the research, what research is telling us we should do in order to keep up like these other professions. We are trying to respond. So as we are constantly asking for feedback from people, and it's both good and not so good sometimes, and we're trying to respond by iterating what we're doing, both at in-service and in response to the needs of people. We're having lots of one-to-one conversations with people. That has been really helpful to get a better idea of individual needs, because there are so many different entry points that people could be experiencing. And then we've been creating tools or changing tools that aren't working as we implement them. This slide is just it's a part of a body of evidence that's growing. It's very easy to find this information. There are organizations across the country that are writing about this, thinking about it, researching it, and these are all linked to something. So if you want to dig more into sort of what's happening across the country with this work, competency-based learning, proficiency-based learning, and innovating in education, there's more information there. So I recently found myself using the phrase, "we're building the plane," while flying it, and as I was saying it, I realized that we're really not there anymore. We were probably there 3 years ago, but we have a lot of tools in place. We've done a lot of work over the past 10 years. We have a lot of things in place, and we are still definitely responding to the weather, but we're not sitting on top of the plane anymore, putting in parts while it's flying. And then I personally couldn't do this work without remembering where we're hoping to get to, some of the outcomes that we're hoping for. Students having foundational skills, being motivated, engaged, being able to learn on their own, accessing rigorous content because they have those foundational skills. This is all going to allow teachers to have more time to provide feedback, design engaging learning, collaborate to create those integrated experiences and share their expertise. And, you know, students are going to end up being prepared for work and college and be competitive. They're going to have competitive transcripts. They're going to have competitive information to send up to their future experiences. So I always try to keep these things in my mind when things get a little bit bumpy. If anybody has questions.
Thanks, Gab.
Thank you, Gab.
Appreciate it. Michelle?
Courtney's a lot of slides, a lot of presentations to manage tonight. So I really wanted to talk about sort of the place of educational equity, both a focus here in Vermont as a state and also here in Franklin Northeast. So I wanted to really give you an overview of some of the guiding work that's pushing what we're doing. The State Board of Education and the legislature have made revisions to the education quality standards that take effect July 1st, 2025. Those education quality standards are the guidelines by which schools are required to be measured against for their performance. So I want to give you a little bit of some of that information, some context and data in FNESU and beyond, and then it's just some of the projects and responsibilities that I'm working on as a director. So the educational quality standards are really, like I said, the standards that schools are required to demonstrate. They describe what a high quality education should look like for students who attend our public schools. The existing rules are the current ones that are in place right now are an update from the 1997 school quality standards. They were approved in 2013 and went into effect in 2014. The new rules were adopted in August of this year and went into effect on July 1st. I just put up sort of the statutory authority, so that's from the legislature in Title 16, and the language is right from the statute, but I think the translation is more important. So these rules are required by the State Board of Ed and are designed to give every Vermont student a real chance to succeed in school, regardless of their background. The school quality standards are the revisions are very much couched in ideals of equity and making sure that schools are providing every student what they need. I wanted to start with a couple of celebrations. The standards are about 35 pages, and all of these items that are checked are things that we've already started working on in Franklin Northeast. We are definitely on our way. We have begun this work and we're well poised for this implementation in July. So you'll hear a lot of the terms that maybe we've used in the past around flexible pathways, personalized learning plans, tiered systems of supports, curriculum coordination, proficiency-based graduation requirements, needs-based professional learning, staff evaluation, culturally responsive and relevant instructional materials, our comprehensive local assessment system, and these continuous improvement plans are all cases that are going to be evaluated by the Agency of Education, and we have already developed mechanisms to start to review those. So that's, I think, it's a celebration that we have here in Franklin Northeast. We've been working on this for a while. So the EQS really has three big ideas. The first one is to ensure access to high-quality learning opportunities for all students. The second is to create learning environments that are safe, fair, and welcoming to everyone. And the third is to protect all students from being excluded or treated unfairly based on some identity characteristic, whether it's their race or gender, religious affiliation, disability, economic status. Those are all ways that kids experience sort of discrimination or marginalization. I wanted to bring us back to our board goals because I think that you'll see a lot of synergy between the three big ideas in the EQS and our three board goals. So I kind of tagged them with those three big ideas. And I think the thing that the board worked really hard on when they developed these goals was that all really does mean all. And that was an intentional decision when they used that language, that all students would be reading on grade level by the end of third grade, that all students from the class of 2028 and beyond will use a body of evidence to demonstrate graduation readiness, and that all students would demonstrate growth in the core competency areas of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and responsible decision-making over the course of an academic year. So all of those things really reference all of our kids. All means every student. Students of color, students who identify as LGBTQ+, students who are economically disadvantaged, students who are unhoused or in unstable housing, students with disabilities, students with mental health challenges, students who are multilingual learning English, and students from migrant farm families. Oh, hold on, I'm not quite done yet. It's not all the way down. These are your children, your grandchildren, your relatives, neighbors. They are our children. So I have some data that I pulled out just to sort of highlight some of the places we see discrepancies in our district. And some of this data is district level, some of it is a more statewide picture because of the way the data is collected. This screen shows you on the left-hand side, this is the performance of students in reading on our STAR reading scores who are not economically disadvantaged. So students who are basically use a paid lunch sort of formula. So you'll see the red are students who are not performing at the expected proficiency level. They're below proficiency. Yellow is nearly there, green is meeting the proficiency level, and then blue is above. And what I want to show you is that the difference between our students who are non-economically disadvantaged and on the right-hand side are the students who experience economic disadvantage. And you can see there are more students in the red in that area, and the bars are longer in the red and shorter in the green and the blue. The same for math, same formula. You've got the shorter red bars for kids who are not economically disadvantaged versus the ones who are economically disadvantaged. This data comes from a survey that's given every 2 years called the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. It's put out by the CDC. It's a national assessment, and the results. What I pulled out just a couple different frames to show you. This is middle school students who are experiencing poor mental health. And the chart on the left-hand side, the first bar is for students who are also identified as LGBTQ. The second bar is for students who are heterosexual or cisgendered. So they are the gender that they were assigned at birth, and that's what they identify with. The next group are females, and the next group are males. So we see some discrepancy in the rates of experiencing mental health challenges with those different groups. And then the second, the colorful chart with the red, yellow, and blue are students who have either hurt themselves on purpose, as the blue, have had a suicide plan as red and have attempted suicide as yellow. And all of those numbers are challenging, I think, to look at, but the more challenging ones are the number of students who identify as LGBTQ are substantially higher than those who are heterosexual or cisgender. This is the high school data, same populations, same kind of image. And this from the same survey. This is students who have been treated unfairly at school because of their race or ethnicity. So BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color, and is the term used in the survey. But in this particular chart, it shows that the students of color have a 56% rate of feeling treated unfairly at school because of their race versus their white non-Hispanic peers at 14%. So although most students in this report, 79%, said they're never treated badly because of their race, more than half of the students feel like they have been. There's some data here around social media and bullying. So the charts, the bar charts are around students who've experienced bullying. And you'll see the first chart lists the LGBTQ students who have disabilities, so they're either on an IP or 504 plan. Students who are hetero and cisgendered, or students who are not on an IEP. So you can compare those rates again. Students who are LGBTQ or have IPs and 504s have a higher rate of being bullied than those who are not. And then the bottom one is the middle school. And that showed the difference. We happen to have, that data happened to show both on-school property or electronic bullying. So there's a combination of both. And just I found the rates of students using social media, probably is of no surprise to anyone who has a youth in their home, but 30% of high school students use social media multiple times an hour. And in middle school, 60% are using it multiple times per day, and 32% say they check on it once an hour or more. This chart is around students who've experienced unwanted sexual experiences. The two charts on the left are from the YRBS, so those are the rates of students, females, males, LGBTQ, and hetero cisgendered in that order. And then the second one is local data. This is the number of students who have been involved in a sexual harassment referral here in Franklin Northeast. So last year, the rates were 68%. 9 of those went through the full process, which means they made a complaint and it was investigated and a decision was made. And then this year we've had 24 so far, and 1 has gone through the full process. And I share that data just to give us a picture of what some of our kids are experiencing, both locally and statewide, that there are disparities that they're experiencing, and it's something that we need to pay attention to. This last slide, I don't do a lot on it, but just a kind of direction. It's sort of the 3 bottom boxes. These are the big things that I'm involved in. So the first one is around coordination and supervision of programs. I work with our multilingual learners program, our family engagement coordinators, our students who are unhoused or in transitional housing, and then also our social emotional learning program. I work closely with Callie on that. I collaborate on a number of projects with a variety of folks in our district, so heavily involved in the curriculum and instruction team, working on professional learning and instructional practices in our classrooms, working with the central office leadership team, our building leaders. I sit on a couple of different school level student improvement teams, as well as our couple different district school improvement teams. I work with a number of teachers and teacher teams on invitation to talk about different things they have come up in their classrooms, questions that they want to deal with. I've had a number of student groups that I've worked with, and as well as some caregivers and community members in general. And then kind of a list of some other either regulatory or collaborative sorts of work that I'm doing here at the central office or statewide. Anybody have any questions?
Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate you putting that all together. So Callie. Thank you.
So my name is Callie Goss. My title is SEL Coordinator. Before we start, if you're online, if you could just make sure you have a piece of scrap paper next to you. If you're here, you have a blue Post-it note. I know you brought your own notebook, so I won't give you a Post-it note. Dominic, I'll pass one to you.
Share.
Start. So you'll need that a couple times throughout my presentation. I'm going to give you an overview of what social emotional learning is and is not, and also the progress that we've made as a district and how we got there. So before we start, I know the acronym SEL has kind of taken on a life of its own and become almost triggering and divisive along political lines. So it's my goal in this spotlight to challenge us to reframe social emotional learning as more than having students watch videos or take deep breaths, but really think about operationalizing what skills do we want students to have. Gab and Michelle, this aligns with what they've already introduced tonight. So speaking of like operationalizing this, let's take a second to look at what skills or observable outcomes we're aiming for when we say social emotional learning. So what are we trying to do? What skills are we hoping students develop? So I'm first going to ask you to do some reflecting on your own about your own skills and strengths in your life and when you interact with people or when you deal with your daily responsibilities. So I'm going to list 5 statements. You're going to think about the extent to which you agree with those for yourself. You're not going to share these with people next to you. We're not going to report out. Just think about you and your daily experiences. To what extent do you agree? So I can often understand how people are feeling before they tell me. If you want to get even more out of this activity, you can think of an example in your head or a time when you demonstrated that skill. I change the way I do things when something doesn't work. I go out of my way to show others they matter. I work with others to solve problems. And I stand up for myself without putting others down. So here, those were some of the examples or observable outcomes we're hoping for when we use the phrase social emotional learning. So with that said, when we're talking about skill building, it's even more helpful when we translate it to words and actions that happen when we're talking to students. So if we take one of those skills, I work with others to solve problems. I'm going to give an example that could be any of our classrooms in FNESU. This happens to involve my children. My kids are 2, 4, and 6, and the kids featured here are 4 and 6. This happened a couple weeks ago. But again, could happen in any of our classrooms, looking a variety of different ways. So the library gecko needs to be fed. Kids are only around for this task occasionally, so there's no established routine or schedule for turn taking. Miss Hillary asks Grace if she wants to do it. She says yes. Miss Hillary asks her to count out 15 mealworms for Oscar. In the meantime, Bowden, whose entire personality hinges on his love of animals, walks up and mentions that he wants to do it. A disagreement escalates. So problems like this happen probably every hour in our classrooms, right? So when we think about building social skills, the words and the actions we use in response to problems like this have the capacity to build skills that we use every day in our relationships and in our work. So if you go to the next slide, you have some options in how you respond in a situation like this. And this is the type of work we're engaging with our teachers. So you could say something like, never mind, I'm going to feed Oscar, or Grace is doing it next time. That would solve the problem, right? And you have decided something, but there's another path here. You could think about saying something like validating their feelings, right? Oh, this is a really special job. Both of you want a chance to do it. Put the mealworms away for a second and turn to the 4 and 6-year-old. Before we start, how could we solve this? Now, what actually happened in real life, they went back and forth a couple times and realized Bonin didn't even want to count out any mealworms. What he wanted was to be the one to put the mealworms in the tank. So they came up with a solution. Grace was doing all 15. Bowden set it in the tank, and then Hillary, who's a fabulous librarian in Swanton, told them about how often Oscar needs to eat. It's every other day because he's older. He has to have live mealworms because they have more nutrients, and it's actually mental stimulation when they're like wiggling around because he has to catch them and coordinate his tongue with it. So they got all that instruction too, right? So next one. That was an opportunity to teach and practice a skill, right? You're working with someone, there's a problem, and they work together to come up with a solution. Now, if you're thinking in your head, and if you're a parent or a grandparent, like that is not how I respond to situations. Also keep in mind, the goal here is not good and bad. It's the more pattern, or the more frequently we skew toward green responses, the more opportunities we have to help students develop skills. And another thing to keep in mind, it also depends on your own emotional bandwidth too, because if you're on day 4 of solo parenting, you're going to respond more orange, and that's okay. But the more aware you are of seeing these opportunities, the more kids benefit. So I wanted to give a window into Wayfinder, because I'll talk a little bit more about that program later, but these are the types of opportunities that are embedded in a curriculum like Wayfinder. So they use a variety of different instructional tools to have these conversations with kids in terms of modeling social skills, like the one I just talked about, and helping kids practice. So in first grade, students can do an activity where they talk about the power of asking for what you need instead of telling, and using tone to adjust to the context. So kids think about the phrase, stay away from me. What do you really need in that situation, and how could you ask for what you need? In 4th grade, students learn how to take responsibility, and part of taking responsibility sometimes includes apologizing. They learn about the 3 different parts of a good apology. One thing we all could learn from, I think, in terms of like humans or adults in general, part of a good apology is acknowledging the impact, which we as adults often go to, I was just trying to. That Wayfinder teaches kids is never a part of a good apology or acknowledging the impact. And then students read scenarios and practice using apologies to fit a hypothetical scenario. In 7th grade, students learn about how social media is very different from reality, and then work together in peer groups to act out different reels that show how vacations are portrayed one way on Facebook or Instagram, and the reality of vacations, like delayed flights, cranky toddlers, hunger, that's very different from social media. How the way we act with our significant others is very different on social media versus reality. They're analyzing those situations in 7th grade through Wayfinder. In a different 10th grade lesson, they take a look at a value spectrum and identify what values are important to me, and what values do I think society cares most about, and how does that compare with what I value. So these are the types of experiences that we're hoping students have exposure to and practice in their weekly Wayfinder lessons. So why does this matter, or why is this important? There is a lot of well-established research about the value of social emotional learning, or more just practicing, having opportunities to practice social skills in explicit lessons. So there's 3 kind of categories of outcomes. One is classroom outcomes. Kids tend, when they have better social skills and ability to regulate, they are more engaged in lessons, and they achieve higher levels academically. There's outcomes related to their experience with school. So they tend to have better relationships with teachers, better relationships with peers, and they have a stronger sense of belonging in school, which leads to a decrease in problem behaviors. There's also established studies that longer term, students with better social skills are more likely to graduate high school, earn a college degree, and have a career. So there's another kind of sense of responsibility here that it's a response or focusing on building students' social skills and their kind of attending to their emotional well-being is responding to community needs. So we can no longer assume that kids have certain experiences socially before they get to us. Just like we can't expect them to know how to read by the time they get into kindergarten. We can't expect that they all know how to solve the gecko issue by the time they get into a kindergarten classroom, and that's what we help them to do. And if a kid comes to us not knowing how to read, we support them with curriculum and practice getting there. If a kid comes to us and can't solve the gecko problem, we help them get there. There's a parallel in how we do things. So when we think about social emotional learning, it's really not an issue, or it's inaccurate to say it's in place of. It's more accurate to say it's in direct support of academic goals and makes students more available for learning and makes their classrooms more productive and more enjoyable places for teachers and students. And it's also an extension of. So we all would agree that academic success, or like the content you mastered in 12th grade, has very little to do with your success now and your well-being and your satisfaction with your life now. Kids need more to succeed when they graduate and in the future than just passing a class. And that's what tending to social emotional skills allows us to do. This is a board goal related to social emotional learning. I'm not going to read it to you. Michelle already did. It's just kind of drawing our attention to work that was started a year before I was hired. Now, how did this process unfold after the board goal was created? So I was hired as a part-time social emotional learning coordinator, and I'm still a part-time employee. I work half-time. Now, due to the time constraints of that position and also just how decisions are made collaboratively, we created a district-wide SEL team a year and a half ago. So we meet about every 6 to 8 weeks. This team is representative of all schools and various roles. So we have building leaders, central office leaders, classroom teachers, school counselors, and they all have had a voice in where we're at and the progress that we've made so far. So we started our work a year and a half ago by completing a reflection. This is a 10 indicators reflection. That's a well-known tool for assessing how schools and systems are doing related to building social skills in their kids. One need that emerged was explicit SEL instruction. There were questions about our past program, about how well it was meeting our needs, and then there was a big hole we didn't have a resource to pull from in middle and high school. So that emerged as the first need. After that, we read some research to identify our needs. I'm not going to read all of the phrases in the pink column, but we searched for a program that was developmentally relevant, that included authentic storytelling and culturally relevant content. For middle and high schoolers, we wanted a program that was flexible and focused on naming and scaffolding skills. Now, we looked at 3 programs in depth. These are well-known, established programs that are recognized by CASEL, who's kind of the leader nationally of this work. We landed on Wayfinder on our representative team. And this is an activity we did. The dots represent kind of a heat map of priorities that we cared most about in our decision. So to highlight a couple, it has a clear progression of skills, and it also includes a lot of a variety of activities. So there are short videos in some lessons. There's also journaling exercises. There's reflection activities. There's group games. There's role plays. We liked how versatile it was. This is just a sample of some of the evidence that informed our decision. And what are the results of this process, so that are supported by evidence? And by this process, I mean the process that led us to Wayfinder, which was a recent decision in our SEL journey. So I'll start with the graph. So that question was part of a survey sent out in numerous communication channels to teachers, anyone who had a Wayfinder account was asked to weigh in. 59 people responded, and that was what they thought about whether Wayfinder is a valuable resource in their efforts to build students' social and emotional skills and create a sense of belonging in their teaching space. I included a quote from a third grade teacher and also a leader at Richford High School, so I'll let you read those on your own. Now, we all know investing in a curriculum resource is an investment, just like any other subject area. Related to that, it's also a celebration to see that, whoops, got it, okay. It's also a celebration to see that since our launch, we have gotten a variety, frequent kudos from our reps at Wayfinder, even compared to larger districts, at how much we're utilizing this resource. So since the beginning of the school year, educators in our district have viewed over 8,500 activities now, and over 4,000 lessons have been downloaded from K to 12. Now, choosing a resource is one step we've taken toward this goal, but it can't be the only one, and it's not the only one. So I wanted to include a couple other examples of progress we're making toward this goal. So like I said, Wayfinder was an investment, and it has not been a plug and play. We selected this, now let's move on to the next thing. We're working really hard to integrate it in a number of different contexts and doing it really purposefully. So for example, counselors are using Wayfinder to support their small group skill building. We made specialized toolboxes for behavior techs at the STEPS program to support students in alternative settings, like when breaks pop up in their schedule, how can we use those pockets of time to build and practice social skills? Secondary students all need personalized learning plans. Wayfinder supports the completion of those. So we're working really intentionally to use Wayfinder as much as we can in a number of different settings. Last year and this year, when you talk about skill building, again, it makes the most sense when you think about what can I see teachers do and what are we hoping teachers say, like what types of language support this skill building. We conducted classroom walkthroughs last year focused on the indicator of teacher-student relationships. This year we're focusing on routines, classroom routines and procedures, taking time to develop tools that list out what is evidence, teacher evidence and student evidence that this work is actually happening in classrooms. I've linked the results here. They'll be available to anyone with agenda. We also have helped new teachers embed social teaching authentically, supporting teachers in setting up routines at the beginning of the year with their students that support skill building. In settings like how to help your students lead a parent conference or lead a family conference. How do you come back from a long break with students and reset them and remind them about expectations and norms in a room where everyone feels like they belong and that we value and practice these social skills every day. Now, coming up next, the couple questions reflected on at the beginning are part of an embedded assessment called Waypoints that asks students to think about how much they are owning these social skills. In January, they'll complete a reflection like this about themselves, and then we will look at the data to say what are our students' strengths, what areas do we see for opportunity, and how can we plan activities and exercises and lessons that build these skills. To summarize, teaching social emotional skills is not the same as managing student behavior. I think Gab and Michelle talked about what education looked like many decades ago, and even recently, much of the focus has been on if a student does this behavior, then what is the consequence? Now, we still have to hold students accountable, and sometimes that does mean being removed from a space, losing a privilege, and this shift requires us to think, one more, and what social emotional skill does this kid need to learn and how can I teach it? So it's not either or, it's focusing on managing student behavior and getting students to comply is no longer the focus, but if we continually just focus on consequences, we're missing an opportunity to build skills that really serve kids. I also included the word systemic because this is important enough work where to not focus on it systemically is to leave it up to chance, right? There's incredible variability between teachers in terms of their expertise, what resources can be found randomly online. There's a wide variety of quality. So it's important enough where we have to do this systemically, which is what we're doing. And then finally, don't click anything else. One last thing to ask you to practice. On your Post-it note, I'm going to describe one more scenario and then ask you to practice how you could think about a situation as a skill building opportunity. So Grace, the 6-year-old lost her first tooth actually it was like a month ago now. So she lost it out of her mouth, and then she actually lost it because she couldn't find it and it's somewhere in her kitchen. She was very distraught. This is a problem. Okay, so I could have delivered like the verdict and just squashed it, which sometimes I do. Let's have a moment of vulnerability here. But there's also an opportunity here. What skill, if you look at the list on the right, could I help develop or could I foster in this situation? What opportunity exists? And what could you say or do that might help her build a skill that could serve her in the future? So you're not going to share this with anyone, but just take a second to jot on your Post-it note. What could you say or do? Her tooth is lost. She's really bummed. Another way to reframe this too is when something similar happens to you, how do you solve the problem? Or what would you go to get through it? And here is what she ended up doing. We decided that she could write a letter, and I'll give you a second to read it. She did still get money, but the message here was when you have a problem, you could use your voice to ask for what you need. And that it could be as simple as that. Whether it be like a refrain that you kind of coach her through, this is an opportunity. And again, not every moment is going to work out like this, but paying attention and learning about developing social skills makes you see those moments more often. And that's what we're hoping for with teachers and in our investment with Wayfinder. So that's it. Any questions before we move on? Okay. Thank you for listening and for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you, Karen.
Absolutely, thank you so much. I know a lot of work and time went into all three of those, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the money conversation, Morgan.
Okay, and I'm going to knock out a few of these little ones first. Every year we come to this board and get authority to accept a certain amount of federal grants. This is often a requirement to apply for them. We need to show some evidence in the minutes that you have given us authority to go after them. So I would be looking for a motion to accept all FY26 grant funds, including but not limited to Idea B Preschool, Medicaid, Title I, Title IIA, Title IV, 21st Century Learning Centers, BEST, and MAC.
I'll make that motion. We'll do that by roll. Emily?
Aye.
Zach?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye.
There's also a requirement in statute that Lynn forces me to bring to you a questionnaire, which I had sent out to you about an hour before the meeting. It's called the Financial Management Questionnaire, and it is me telling you how the operations of the business office work, so that if something goes south, the board isn't allowed to say, well, we had no idea that everybody in the office was allowed to sign checks or whatever it is. So
Which
that
is not actually
it's
true.
not actually true.
Just want to clarify that.
So that has been sent to you by email. If you're comfortable making that motion tonight, you certainly can. If you want time to sit on it, I'll bring it back in January. There are really very few changes from one year to the next. Last year, we had to check the box that we had a new signer on one of the accounts because we had hired Sonia and she was on the account, so that one went away. They're all fairly straightforward, talking about the process as well as who has authority to which parts of our procedures. And it's, you sign it, I put it in a file and nobody looks for it.
Yeah. I'm comfortable making that motion. Any discussion from the board on that?
So that would be a motion to authorize the board chair to sign the financial management questionnaire.
Okay, we'll do that. I'll make that motion. We'll do that by roll. Emily?
I said aye, could you hear me?
Oh, now I can,
Oh,
thanks.
I'm here.
Okay. Zach?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
And Mary's an aye.
Okay, then we'll hop into the budget presentation. And then you have the ability to share that. No.
We're going to be starting with the 14-page one.
I am starting with the slideshow. You have both the detail and the recap
Yeah.
in your email.
Okay.
Again, this is similar from earlier meetings, both at the SU level and at your local board. So tonight we're talking about the SU budget, the budget development schedule. Normally we try to finalize the budget by our December meeting. If you do not feel comfortable doing that tonight, we would need to schedule a meeting in early January. We want to do that before January 8th, which is when NMV is scheduled to finalize their budget. Irish covered the board goals, third grade kids reading, social emotional learning, skills, not seat time. I won't spend any time on that, but that will be part of the budget presentations that we take to your communities. You've seen the enrollment slides before. The takeaway with this is that even though student population is declining generally across the state, it's declining pretty sharply in some corners of the state, and we're actually bucking that trend in Franklin and Chittenden counties. So on this, we're anticipating the ER district will have a relatively flat population trend line over the next 5 years, and NMV will actually be increasing based probably on recent birth rates there that's driving that. Budget considerations, we've talked about the health insurance premium increase. We have not been given any indication to think that DFR is apt to not approve that, so there are a lot of negatives in that statement. DFR is likely to approve that 12% increase. If they don't, they could actually force it upwards and require VHI to have a greater reserve to buffer against future claims. We've never seen that. VHI does a good job with their presentation, so I would anticipate that that number is solid. We are in negotiations with both support staff and the teachers. We will be covering this a little bit later, but we had the first proposal exchange last night. I have made some changes to my salary assumptions in this budget, and I will make those in the NMV and ER budgets. If you want to know the details of that, we would do that in executive session, since we are in negotiations with both units.
Right.
The last fraction of people are coming out of the ARP ESSER grant. Those are folks who are in there from July to September of this year when the grant finally ended. Use of the fund balance, I bumped this number up from the previous meeting. At the district level, when there's money left over in, say, 2024, the voters basically own that money, and you can ask them permission to put it towards a capital reserve fund, towards a tuition reserve fund. If they reject that, or if you don't give them that option, all that money goes into buying down your tax rates. At the supervisory union level, you, the board, are the voters for that. And so over the past probably 10 years, we've been working on building up an unreserved fund balance. Because the supervisory union is not allowed to borrow money, and because we have to start paying people on July 1, we can't zero out a budget July 1 every year. Lynn and I met today. I've been talking with my colleagues about how they handle this. Originally, I was thinking of bringing about $113,000 forward to, instead of buy down the tax rate, to buy down the assessment. We're comfortable bumping that up from what we're seeing, so that will help drive down the amount of money that you need to build in your local budgets to send here. And then finally on that list, almost $300,000 more coming in for the census block grant. This is the new way that we fund special ed in the state. There was a 4-year transition mechanism to get to it. We historically were receiving less money than we should have under the new formula. And so we're seeing each year we're getting a little bit more until we get up to a point where we expect that revenue will be relatively stable from year to year. So my anticipation is that next year we'll see another roughly $300,000 increase, unless the student numbers change dramatically. A lot of staffing changes. I've shown it to you in the past. Different programs. We thought it'd be good to just get it out there all on one slide. This has changed a little bit since your November meeting, but not dramatically, except in the special ed realm. So the budget in front of you now has an additional almost full-time special ed teacher. It's 0.8. It's kind of rounding up people who are currently part-time. We anticipate them retiring, replacing a full-time teacher. 4 additional behavior specialists. I'll let Michelle DeBerge talk about that. I have some questions about that. Kind of related to that, reduction of 1 speech language pathologist. It's a position that we have not been able to fill for several years, and we could use them if they were out there, but it's unlikely that we're going to fill them, and so we're pulling that out of the budget. Roughly a reduction of 1 FTE in OT-PT services. That's an area where we don't have really, we've got 1 full-time staff member and then there's pieces and parts of people, so we adjust that from year to year. Reduction of 3 paraeducators at the SU level. Reduction of a half-time custodial person at the SU level. Pretty minor fractional change to food service staffing. Reducing 3 NCSS workers. So these are people who are not your employees, but they are people that we paid NCSS to place in your schools. And so reducing those. And a lot of those changes, the NCSS workers, the paraeducators, and then the addition of the behavior specialists, I think is fair to say is primarily due to the expansion of this alternative program and bringing some of those kids into that in-house program where we have a different type of staffing level. Lastly on here, 2 changes from the last budget. Reduction of 2 days a week of an ELL teacher. This is a position that has not been filled yet. It's hard to predict where that need is going to go, but folks are following the news. The incoming administration has said they're removing the rule that prevented ICE from going to hospitals, churches, and schools to arrest people. And so it's feeling like schools are not going to be as safe a place as they were in the past. And so we're anticipating that caseload may also drop. And then finally, we have interventionists paid out of CFP that is planning on retiring, and we will not be refilling that position based on where we think CFP money is going to end up. And we kind of put a sidebar on that because it's in your written report. Again, new administration coming in, new priorities. We do not actually have a federal FY25 budget yet. That's the budget year that started in October, and that funds our FY26 grants. What we are hearing is that the folks who are coming in are proposing cutting Title II out completely, cutting Title I by 25%. There's kind of mixed messages on the special ed funding, the Idea B grant. It feels like that one is relatively safe. But currently we have 16 staff members in your buildings, primarily interventionists, who are funded out of the titles. And if that's cut by 25%, that's 4 people or 3 more people in addition to this one that would likely not be funded.
And it's impossible to know whether we would, I mean, that would be an enormous amount of money to pad the budget with for the possibility that that funding would dry up. I mean, they wouldn't do that midstream, right? Like,
we don't have a budget for the year that we're working in right now,
right.
So I wouldn't bet any money one way or the other.
One of the things just connected to that, because there's so much uncertainty, I will bring this board and the 2 district boards the reduction in force notification request for the January meetings, because of the uncertainty. You can't own all the contracts you have, potentially, until we know more. So you're going to, if the board approves, you would notify the union that you're contemplating reduction in force.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you actually would, but I think I know my recommendation will be there's too much volatility to not notify the union, and that there's that potential this year.
And related to that, at the local board levels, there have been discussions about staff who are currently under CFP and whether there's a need to bring them into the local budgets. That has been a more active discussion on the Enosburg-Richford side and the NMB side, primarily, I think, because this interventionist was serving NMB schools, so that takes a little bit of the pressure off of 2 of those schools. And we have, since COVID, we've been having trouble spending all of our CFP money, so it's been rolling forward. And this is the year that we're able to spend it all, but we're kind of spending some of the stuff that had been in the bank, and we're kind of required to spend it within a couple of years. But we are, even if everything goes through with the FY25 budget, we were anticipating some of the schools would have trouble funding those programs. The other piece marginally related to this, and it's in your report, is the incoming administration is making noise that they want to get rid of the community eligibility program, which is the program that extends free meals to all students. One of the other things that does is that allows us to extend Title I funding eligibility to all of our schools. And so if that program goes away, we will return to everybody having to fill out those free and reduced lunch forms, and only people at a certain poverty level and below getting those free meals. That will likely knock, I would anticipate, at least 3 of your schools, if not 4, out of consideration for Title I money, which is the bigger chunk of money. So even if the overall funding that comes from the federal government is left alone, we may have individual schools that no longer qualify for that. I doubt that would happen for FY26. I think that's more of an FY27 concern, but we're in for an interesting couple of years. We just want people to be aware of that.
and there's no way that the state could even come remotely close to compensating for that loss of funds times how many systems we're talking about.
Could they? I suppose they could. It would be hugely expensive. And it would either need another funding stream, or it would be a major hit on the ed fund and so on.
Right.
The pressures are all going in the opposite direction.
Yeah,
At the
yeah.
same level.
Morgan, I have one other question. The SLP that is impossible to find, are there any online resources that we can lean on to do virtual speech and language?
That's what we're currently doing.
Okay.
We contract with a company called Access, and
Yeah,
we have 1.5
yeah.
special educators.
I'm sure it's, not the same as having a person right there, but
It's working. There's, I would say the SLPs are incredible online. The challenge is getting little people from their class to the services and having to find the human that can organize all of that. That's been the challenge with the online. The actual services are fantastic. It's finding a spot and a human to go get the students for the
Right.
meals.
So one of the things I'll say about speech and language, in addition to maybe some of the other positions, is that all schools in the state are feeling pressures differently than they have in the past. And we are definitely staffed in a much different way than some of our counterparts in other parts of the state, whereas we have how many for the whole SU for speech and language?
Of in-person people, 1.5.
So 1.5, and the equivalent of how many for online? 2. So that's for 2,000 students. And there are places in the state where they might have 1 for 2 pre-K classrooms. The way in which we staff services and support for our schools are different. And those are all conversations that people across the state are having and having to navigate. So there could be the potential that the candidate pool might change depending on discussions that are happening in other parts of the state. So even though we haven't been able to find one, it's possible that there may be reductions in other parts of the state that would improve our outcomes in terms of the search process.
And leave it open on school spring
Yeah.
continuously.
Yeah.
So we'll blow through a couple of these quickly. Similar to the conversations that we have at your local meetings, 3/4 of our budget paid in our people, and then a big chunk of that purchase services is paying Terracel to bus your kids around. Look at it a different way on the next slide. What we do, so the red is loosely instruction. Direct instruction would be primarily your EL teachers. Special ed is your special ed instructors in schools. Student support is really special ed. Instructional support would be professional development for teachers. Librarians would come out of that in your local budget. A lot of the technology work we do comes out of that. District administration, that little green line is you, the board, and much of the superintendent's office. Couple of small green lines there, school administration, central services, operations, and then that big green section is transportation, and the big blue section is food service. So it kind of gives you a picture of where we're spending our money. And then on the next slide, based on what you'd asked us to do last year, really trying to do a better job of sharing what of this budget is really spent at the school level. And so that red half, starting at noon and going down to 6, each of those bands represents one of our schools or one of our alternative programs. Then from 6 on the way back up, you'll see transportation is district-wide. We don't try to parse that out. Food service, district-wide, we don't try to parse that out by schools. And then we're down to about a little over a quarter of the budget is we've termed central office. It's really the stuff that we're unable to efficiently identify at a specific school. So it's me, it's Courtney, Jamie, Lynn, but it's also people like your OTs and PTs who are really just flying in on a very specific case-by-case basis. Homestead tax rates, we've talked about this at our local meeting. Obviously, the 2 districts of ours are down in the basement. With the change in how CLA is calculated, I will expect that this graph will kind of spread out a little bit, left or right, but we are likely to be pretty close to the bottom again for FY26. And I'm going to take over. I'm happy to try to answer any questions on the detail that I sent you by email. I am possibly going to pull up the recap. We lost our Zoom license because we're trying to cut costs. And now we've got Google Meet and we need Courtney to figure it out. Okay, so this is what you have in your packet. I don't know if I can make it bigger. Courtney will make it a little bigger for us. This is chunked up into 2 sections, and for those of you who are your first time around with the SU budget, the first section, general fund expenses, and then general fund revenue are sort of what you typically think of for the conversations that we've just had. Covers central office, covers special ed, food service, the EL program. The second section, bill back expenses. These are expenses that you need to approve as the SU board because we are paying out of the SU. But that basically $1.5 million that we have there are really staff that are in your buildings that your principals are contracting us to pay. So if we have somebody that works half-time under a federal grant and the principal wants them full-time, so maybe they had enough money for a half-time interventionist, but they want to have them full-time in their building, we try to pay them out of one employer. So we pay them out of the SU. The half that goes to the federal grant, we take care of. The half that's supposed to be local, we send a bill to the local district. So that 1.495 is going to net out with money coming in from the 2 districts, and those costs are already built into your budget. So you'll see that if it's an interventionist, it would be under the direct instruction line for a school. We've had assistant principals who are partially paid out of CFP, and that would come out of the administration line for that particular school, or family engagement coordinator would come out of the guidance section of that particular school. So the number that you approved tonight or that you approved in January is going to be bigger. It's going to include that 1.495 as well. But really when we talk about building the budget and building the assessment, we're talking about this first section up top.
And Morgan, these numbers here do not reflect any potential buffer for funds that may dry up from the federal government with the...
Correct. So if your title funds dry up, that is likely going to be a hit to your local budgets because those are primarily the interventionists that are in your schools. And so if the principals decide the money's gone, but they need to keep that position, either they're going to need to build that in before the January meeting, or if it happens during mid-year, we're going to have to work with them and figure out what they're not going to spend on in order to keep those positions. And this is all, there's a big caveat that it assumes that we riff the appropriate number of staff and do that right. The piece that worries me more is the Idea B grant and the special ed funding, because that Idea B grant is really what largely funds the alternative programs that we have set up now. And so if we pass this budget and we get to April, both district budgets are passed, and we kind of have a bow around FY26, and then the IDB money doesn't come in, we're going to have discussions about where we trim to make up for that. I'm assuming the board isn't going to say, well, we're going to get rid of that alternative program, because then you got to find placements for 20, 30 kids out of district at 100 to 150 grand a whack. So we'll be, are we going to tap into some of those unspent reserves? Are we going to cut other services elsewhere out of the SU budget? Are we going to try to find cuts in the local budget and just increase the assessment to offset that? It would be a very difficult process and difficult conversations. Everything I'm seeing tells me that that's an FY27 conversation, at least for special.
Yeah, okay,
I've not seen anybody try to cut that out for next year.
okay. Morgan, do you think that since we need to have an executive session before we potentially make a motion on the budget, do we want to put a pin in the budget discussion, do the rest of your report that's not budget related, do Lynn's report, get through our other votes, and then we'll do all 3 of the executive sessions at the end?
I think it's totally up to you. I don't think that executive session is going to be too long.
No,
But we can take it up whenever you want.
they probably should hear the negotiation update before they finalize, but did you have further that you were going to go?
Not really. The other stuff on my report was informational. The one thing that I would say is with the cuts from the last draft and the increase of that fund balance, the increase to the local assessment is 4.8%. When we met with you locally at the 2 districts last month, we were telling you we were going to bring it in no more than 10%. So we did a pretty significant whack over what numbers you saw in the local meetings
Right.
in December.
Okay, I mean, given the health insurance increases alone, then that isn't, that's not terrible. Okay, so I guess my preference would be to move on with Lynn's report and our other reports from central office staff, and then let the bulk of people get home, since I know the roads are getting worse by the minute. And then we'll do all 3 executive sessions, and then we'll figure out if we're going to make a motion on the budget at the end. Does that feel comfortable for folks? Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, sounds great. All right, thanks, Morgan. So we'll put a pin in that and move on then to the superintendent report, unless you have any other.
No, still waiting on a draft for the FY24 audit.
Okay.
We get the occasional questions from the auditors. I'm still anticipating that all 3 are going to be clean.
Okay, super. All right, thanks, Morgan. Okay, Lynn.
Okay, so we'll jump in. We'll start with personnel. Don't have anything actionable for you under personnel today. You have some hiring information. It is all of that is support staff, both the hiring and the resignation, so no action needed there. We do still have some open positions within the FCU, and I like to say those out loud in case there are people who are watching these videos. We're always looking for speech and language pathologists, and we're looking for, at Enosburg Elementary School, LEAPS assistant site coordinator. I should have just read it, it would have been easier. An alternative program behavior technician, a behavior specialist, a special educator, and substitutes for pretty much all positions: teacher, nurse, paraeducator, custodian, and food service.
Lynn, can I interject for a second?
Yes.
I have had a couple people recently ask me, what is the process for becoming a substitute? So maybe in the public meeting,
Yeah.
we could let people know because I'm always like, I would reach out to the central office and
Yeah.
because I don't actually know all the steps because it's different now because we
Yes.
outsource it. So maybe a little refresher, and I don't know if on the website we have any kind of tab that's how to be a substitute.
Can they apply through that?
On the website, I have the Kelly Services poster.
That's it, Kelly Services, right?
And it has them reach out, it's on our employment opportunities page that you're looking at right now. I'm trying it. And we have a bit.ly link that brings them to a flyer, and then they can either click or do a QR code, and it will bring them to another link for Kelly Services.
Okay,
And if that's a lot of links for people and clicks for people, they can
Yes.
call central office and speak with Jamie, and Jamie will connect them
perfect.
to Kelly Services to apply.
Okay, and how long does that process tend to take? Because I know it involves background checks and some other,
I'll be honest, I don't see that end of it
Okay.
until they're all the way through, so I don't know if
Okay.
you have a sentence, Morgan?
I think it's a couple weeks.
Yeah.
I think it's usually more.
okay.
The form looks generally quick that Morgan's looking at right now.
Okay, great, thank you.
So the next part is about salary advancement. So in the collective bargaining agreement, by December 1 of every year, teachers who intend to move over a column on our pay grid based on incremental growth in the credits that they earn, they get additional compensation as they move over. So 14 teachers have requested column movements. Out of those, there'll be 21 column movements, and that's because several are moving more than one. So they might be moving from B15 and skipping B30 and going straight to masters. So they would next year move over 2 columns and get the benefit of both of those increases. So of all those 21 column movements, that adds $38,250 to the budget, which Morgan has accounted for in the FNESU budget, I believe. And he's thinking about it.
Those two.
Next is retirement notification, and I inadvertently gave both of these updates at the wrong board meeting earlier this month, so now that we're at the right board meeting. Ann Morey will be retiring from a grant-funded position. Ann has served as an interventionist really all over the supervisory union, started out in Bakersfield, has spent a little bit of time in most of our schools, also worked at the Flexible Pathways Academy during and after COVID, and is currently splitting time between Berkshire and Sheldon. So Ann is going to be retiring. So I'd ask the board to make a motion to approve Ann's retirement.
I'll make that motion. We'll do that by roll. Emily?
Aye.
Zach?
Aye.
Sarah, thank you. Mary is an aye. And thanks to Ann, I know she's been with us for a really, really long time and a very valuable member of our staff, so I wish her all the best.
So I feel like I've just spoken to most of you about this within the last 2 weeks, and I don't have a lot of new information since your local district meetings. I'm going to, on every agenda from now until probably the end of the year and next year, we'll have these 4 topics on there. So what we know is that the Commission on the Future of Public Education had a deadline of December 15th where they were supposed to submit their report to the legislature that had their short-term recommendations for cost containment and or shifts in the education funding system for FY26 potentially. Those were their short-term recommendations. There's something that has come up this week, and I'll be honest, it's been a large week for us here, and I have not dug in deeply with what has been released, but what I think I know is that the commission could not agree on what those short-term recommendations were going to be. So they released a link, which we've been able to access right along, which is really a compilation of all of the ideas that they considered during the work that they've done since July 1 of all the things that could possibly have a positive impact on education funding and spending in the state of Vermont. I think there may be a summary piece to that, but I'll be honest, I have not read that yet. So I think for board members, what you can look for, usually within a few days of something big like that, the Vermont School Boards Association, and now for me, the Vermont Superintendents Association, will send out summaries with information about that. So just be on the lookout for that piece. Right after the holidays, we roll right into the legislative session. So we should have, legislators will be back in early January. We'll have the State of the State with Governor Scott, second week of January. Sometime in January, we will hear from the governor. And then the legislative session will be open. And I think what we'll see are several bills that get introduced during this legislative session that are intended to cost contain, and some will focus on shifts to education funding and potentially the structure of our education system in Vermont. It could go in a lot of different ways, but what we are confident of is that there will be proposed changes. We believe from all the signals that no matter the party, Democrat, Republican, no matter which part of the legislature, House or Senate, there is interest in making big moves this year. So I think we will see some shifts come out of the legislative session. We don't know with confidence what those will be, but I think whatever they do will impact us one way or another. So what we're keeping our eye on right now is what will happen if they do try to move something through that impacts our FY26 budget. It won't make its way through the legislature before we have to warn this budget. So we could be in that situation where we're contending with a budget that has been warned that is now impacted in some way based on legislative action that happens in Montpelier. So we're going to keep our eye close on all of the things that are going through, and we'll communicate with the board. Again, VSBA is a really important body of support for board members, and make sure that you're all reading those pieces. Anything you want to update or add to that, Morgan?
No, I don't think so. I think we're going to have a much clearer picture by January 15th. The folks who, I think there are people who have bills ready to go, and we're hoping that they would have some cover from the commission for their idea, but there's no cover for anyone. It'll just be them pushing them out there.
There are indicators. There are a lot of indicators that I've shared with board members and administrators all through the fall about some of the ideas that are out there that have to do with the size of systems, the size of schools, the size of classrooms, things like that. I think all of those things are on the table. We're seeing data reporting that from the agency, you could tell how some of the data is coming out is being informed by things like the PICA study that are focused on right-sizing the education delivery system in Vermont. I think that one thing that I just want the board to know is that Morgan and I and several administrators across the Supervisory Union have been attending regularly trainings by the Agency of Education that have been offered by New Solutions, K-12, which is, we have worked with these people before. So actually one of the things that Morgan and I have worked with, Nate Levinson is one of the leads for New Solutions, and one of the reasons that we've centralized some of the functions in our schools into our SU budget is for efficiency's sake. So it's something that we learned from Nate years ago, was that idea of when you have each school do the thing, there's a tendency to round that up. And each school has more than they need because they're increasing the amount of time in order to find a person to do the thing. So when we are able to, we hold positions at this level to prevent some of that roundup effect, like emerging multilingual teachers, where several schools need them, but they don't need a full half or a full time. They need a few hours a week, or, you know, a half day a week or a full day a week. And we're able to hold those and deploy where the need is. So we've been learning from Nate Levinson and his group for quite some time. And I want to say there are probably have been around 12 to 15 training opportunities, and we've attended all of them. And some of them have been very useful, just thinking in terms of how do you allocate staff, how do you make decisions about the size of your classes, the size of your schools, how do you communicate about budget. We had a pretty interesting one, a double today, so we had 2 sessions today. So we've been attending those. We continue to work with our administrators around topics like this, thinking about how we are allocating our resources across the supervisory union. Any final things you want to add, Morgan? Any questions? I have a negotiations update that we should do in executive session. I will just say an open session that we are doing negotiations differently than we've ever done them before. We're doubling up. Typically we enter with one, wait until that's concluded and enter with another if we find ourselves in these years where we have both. So we actually had our first negotiation last night. We spent 90 minutes with support staff, shifted over, and spent 90 minutes with teachers for negotiations. So we can't talk about any of that here in open session, but we'll go in to executive to share some of that information. So Mayor, I have that for executive session, and then on the next page, this board heard a grievance from 2 grievances from the union maybe 2 months ago, and the union has requested arbitration related to the grievance. So I'm navigating that with the union president. The union president has requested that we try one last time to come to a resolution around these 2 grievances, and I would like to bring the board in to discuss what that resolution could potentially look like. And again, because this involves agreements with the union, and would be asking the board to give me direction on that, I'm going to ask you to go into executive for that, and that is all I have for those 2 remaining executives.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, so we'll move on to our central office updates. We'll start with Dominic.
Yeah, pretty short one for me this time. Bulk of my time from our last meeting until the notes were due for this was when it was spent on state reporting and navigating our new system, which has been interesting. We're still working out some of the kinks and trying to figure out, when things aren't going through right, if it's something we're doing wrong or if it's something that just isn't working right with the new system yet. But we sure have been a few of those. But it is at least looking like it's promising for the future to be more efficient than what we've been doing in years past. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Gav, Callie, I know you all already did really in-depth spotlights. Anything else you want to highlight?
I just have a couple things that have happened since we wrote this. One is we've invited somebody from an organization called CogX that works on the science of learning, Javier Aguero, to come talk at in-service in January to kind of help make the connection around teaching and learning and some of the work we're doing, and hopefully helping to make the work on the ground seem a little bit more relevant and find some tools, give us some tools. And then secondly, I met with a group of students last Thursday, several from Enosburg, several from Richford. I took the Enosburg students to Richford. We had a really great conversation, really productive, and they're going to be sort of a student committee that's working on Portugal Learner. They're just 9th graders, so start with 9th graders and then we'll roll it up and invite 8th graders in as well along the way. So that group is starting, and it was really fun to hear them talk about their experience and think about how they might have an impact on what's going on.
Great. Thanks so much, Gab. Kelly, anything else?
Oh, shit, I had to go.
Oh, I didn't even see her dip. Okay. All stealth. That was very stealth. Okay, excellent. Michelle?
Yes. So I've been working with special educators this past month on higher leverage math concepts and pairing math strategies with the higher leverage concepts and where students in special ed fit into all of that. We've also discussed the difference between progress monitoring and monitoring progress, and still working a lot towards collecting data around those. And then spend some time working with GAB and special educators around where does special education and portrait learner all connect, and ensuring that students and IEPs can meet the indicators. That's it.
Great. Thanks so much, Michelle. So next, Heather.
Yeah, just a little bit of registration information, just a celebration of Bakersfield. We've been kind of talking about the smaller size there, but our middle school program is growing, and they're up in their daily registration and attendance, and the middle schoolers seem to be coming together for Fun Friday just to hang out with each other. So it's like really nice to see the progress there. As I said in my report, me and two of my coordinators, an elementary coordinator and a middle school coordinator, went to a statewide meeting about Act 139 and the Read Vermont initiative, and kind of talking about what we're doing. It's kind of a great celebration because we were doing quite a lot in our supervisory union. And my team is going to be working with Gab and Leah to kind of just look at what we are already offering and seeing how we can just kind of make a couple of tweaks and some enhancements to make sure that we're connecting with the new curriculum that the school's working with, and we're really just in full alignment with what the students are learning during the school day. And we're also going to be connecting that with Mary and math as well. So just to kind of see where we can do things a little bit differently and to support our students. And similarly, we're working with the multilingual learners or the ELL instructors as well to see again where we can kind of enhance what we're doing to support some more of our students in after-school and summer.
That's great. And the youth center cafe is awesome. I was checking out the website. It's just really an impressive undertaking and so valuable, I'm sure, for the community. Thank you. It's wonderful, Heather. Dawn, you're up next.
So in November, we did our holiday meals in all of our schools. That was a big endeavor for all of the staff involved, including kitchen staff and school staff. We ended up serving a lot of parents and community members. The last one we did was at Montgomery Elementary that aligned with their concert, because a lot of the senior community members like to come in and stay and watch that rehearsal of the holiday concert, so they don't have to come up that night. And so it just is something that they've done there in that school for years, and it's aligned with that. It really works well. Things went great with it. This month I've been in schools quite a bit, just subbing and helping out and whatnot, and also trying to get stuff ready for our 2 upcoming reviews. Our review month is going to be the month of January, with people coming to central office in March. And when they come to central office, we will be taking a big in-depth look at the programs that we go into 2 of our local schools, 2 of our sites, to check out the programs that we do there. This is a review that happens. It used to be every 5 years. I think now it's gone to every 3 years. And so it just seems like with the number of programs that we run, we seem to get a different review quite frequently. But with any luck, things will go good, and we'll skate through that one and not have too many hiccups. So it's a big project to get ready for, sure.
Thanks, Donna, appreciate it. Okay, oh, Michelle Irish, sorry.
That's okay.
I got a little ahead of myself. Do you have anything, do you have anything that you would like to highlight?
I wanted to kind of give you a run through of the data I provided. So Gab and I worked collaboratively to design a student engagement survey that went out to all of our students in grades 3 through 12, and all of our staff in pre-K through 12. And so this is just a summary of those results. The leadership team had their first glance at this data today and were given sort of their school level data to look at. So we're just in the beginning stages of sort of disseminating this. It is kind of a baseline that we've collected this year. We've got some information from it. We'll plan to collect more as we go along year to year. And the only other thing I wanted to add is we were just notified that we've been awarded a grant in combination with the Vermont Department of Health and the Monarch Maples, which is the local pediatrician's office, to really work on student attendance from the 3 kind of layer lanes. So the pediatricians, the health department, and the schools will be working together to look at student attendance and how we can work together to improve that. So that starts in January. We aren't going to be getting a lot of the money from that grant. Most of that's going to serve the other 2 partners, but we'll be getting some support from a program called Attendance Works, which is a national attendance group, and they're providing consultants to work with us to build out our attendance tiered multi-system support system. That's exciting.
Awesome, that is great, thank you so much. Okay, and Fern?
Just working on extending our capital plan to a 5-year plan. We're getting close with that. Finished up a lot of loose end projects over the last month. We finished up a project over at Cold Hall, Richford High School. We were finally, it's been almost a 3-year process of getting the boilers, but I threw some pictures in here. These aren't done, but it's getting real close. We are running currently on full pellets at Richford High, so pretty proud of how that came out. Berkshire, we're going to try to follow up with another pellet system next summer, and just try to start get wound up for the upcoming summer and try to get some projects rolling. So just a lot going on.
Yeah, always great, thank you so much. Beautiful looking pellets.
Yeah.
Pellet boilers
Yeah.
here, rather.
No.
That's looking really sharp. And the pellets are locally sourced, are they?
Currently, they're coming out of New Hampshire.
Nice.
Currently.
Regionally sourced,
Yep.
that's great.
Yep.
Bravo, that's so awesome. Okay, well, thank you all. So I'm going to let all our directors hit the road and get home safely. Have a really lovely holiday season and a very, very happy new year. And I'll make the motion to enter executive session by roll. Emily?
Aye.
Sarah? Zach? And Mary is an aye. We are out of both executive sessions. We have no motions pending from the one related to negotiation discussion, and we, regarding the grievances, no motions pending, but instructing the superintendent to act as per the executive session decision regarding the grievances. And so then our last order of business tonight is to circle back to the FY26 SU budget.
And if you are so ready, it would be a motion to approve the FY26 Franklin Northeast Supervisory Union General Fund budget of $14,628,193.
Okay, so I will make a motion to approve the FY26 Franklin Northeast Supervisory Union General Fund budget of $14,628,193. We will do that by roll. Emily,
Aye.
Zach,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. Thank you so much. Thank you, Morgan, for that heavy lift. Anything else? I'm just double checking board business. So our next meeting will be Wednesday, January 15th at the central office, 6 o'clock. Any other questions, thoughts from the rest of the board? Anything else to discuss? Okay, so I'll make a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you all so much. Have a really lovely holiday season with your family. Safe travels.
Happy